So some of you know that when I was a kid, I lived in all of the states, lived or visited in all of the states and in more than 25 countries because my father was a mathematics educating consultant. He was an expert on how to teach math based on Piaget's cognitive developmental theories. And I promise this is not going to be an academic lecture. But one of the, among the different things that, he believed and has been proven with time is that our brains develop as we age. We're not born with brains that work exactly the way they do when we're grown-ups. And then many of us know that then it starts going downhill again at some point. But I used to be a guinea pig for a lot of his lectures and his videos. It kind of terrifies me to think what may be out there on video, as my dad was using me as proof that kids really don't know what they're talking about. And so I will tell you, one of the things I most remember, because I was a kid probably, was when he would do the demonstration about concrete operations. That's, the understanding of how things all fit together. He would give me a choice, and did I want the 5 M&Ms spread out on a big plate, or did I want the 10 M&Ms in the small little pile? But he wouldn't say, here's 5 and here's 10. He would just say, do you want the ones that are here on the big plate, or do you want this little pile? Spoiler alert, always take the pile. Because, I didn't know any different. That looked like more. It was spread out all over the place. And we've probably seen kids also doing that thing that we learn when we are young, and that is that things still exist even when we don't see them. My husband, we've all had that example of playing peekaboo with a baby, right? And you cover your eyes, or they cover their eyes, and the delight of they've disappeared, they've reappeared, they've disappeared, they've reappeared. My husband Dennis and I recently got ice cream, and we're watching these 2 little girls playing hide and seek. And one of them must have been between 2 and 3, because she was clearly at that age where she just thought when it was her turn to hide, if she went over a few steps away and closed her eyes, nobody could see her. It was so cute. And I think about that sometimes when I hear this story of Jesus not being where they expected him to be. Right? It was a concrete operations or a constancy issue. We think we understand how the world works. We think we understand how bodies show up in space, whether they're being inhabited or not. And we expect when we leave something, and I can imagine you all have this experience with your keys, when we leave something someplace, that is where they will be when we come back, right? So in particular, in this story today, the women were returning to the tomb fully expecting Jesus' body was going to be there, because that is where they left him. And that's how the world works. They were old enough to understand that bodies stay where bodies are placed to rest. However, Jesus wasn't there, and it was terrifying and confusing and really turned things up on their end. And then they had to be reminded, remember? He told you this is what was going to happen. And it was oh yes, he did tell us that. We were confused. So they ran to tell the disciples and the others, and they weren't believed. And so Peter came then to check it out for himself. And he was amazed. And sometimes I wonder, was he amazed because the things came true? Or was he equally amazed just because this body wasn't where he thought this body was supposed to be? And that was kind of amazing, especially after all the trauma that they had just experienced in watching his really horrible death and treatment in those last days. And then they had to be reminded again and again, right? They had to, when Clopas and his companion, who was probably his wife, were on the road to Emmaus, They spent a whole journey talking to Jesus without realizing it was him until he broke bread, and then suddenly they recognized him. We have expectations. We believe that the world works a certain set way, and when things don't quite fit those expectations, it's confusing to us. And in some ways, I don't know about you, but I experience that every winter and with the return of spring. It's almost like I forget that the trees that are in such beautiful bloom are the same trees that I'm looking at in the winter. And the brown ground and all the barrenness that is suddenly bright green, it's like I'm amazed. I'm like Peter. I'm amazed at the flowers and the green and the beauty when something has come and watered and the warmth has arrived. And I think we as people need to kind of live in that amazement, because that is what's going to keep us solidly in our hope and our faith and our strength. Because the world doesn't always work the way we are told it's going to work, whether by our parents or in the classroom or in whatever agreement that we have. You know, I learned that in particular when I first moved to Denver a little over 2.5 years ago, and I discovered that the start of a red light or the start of a green light does not mean I should go. That actually I need to wait a good 10 seconds because the end of a red light actually means hurry up and get through the intersection. And there are some pretty bad accidents that happen here from folks who don't understand that in Denver, there's a different agreement about red lights and green lights for some of us. And I think many of us probably have examples of that in the world otherwise. I mean, I've kind of always had an assumption or an understanding that the United States takes care of other countries, that we offer medicine and food to people who don't have the resources that they need to take care of themselves and one another, that we don't imprison people who are not guilty, that we don't take families away from one another, that we welcome everyone who appears and asks for help. And I understand that these things are not black and white. They are, though, something that I thought we held true. There was a truth that we all held on to about how we love and care for not just ourselves, but our neighbors. Just like the Bible tells us again and again and again. We are called to love God and our neighbors as ourselves. And so how do we do that when we're not really sure? When we're going through a time that maybe seems like we're still stuck in the tomb a little bit, and we're not sure what's going to happen next? Well, the good news is we walk this journey with Jesus every year, but the tomb has been empty now for 2,000 years, right? Christ lives. Christ lives in every single one of us here. Jesus died so that death does not have the last word. And that is a pretty amazing thing. And because of that, we then are called to be the ones who act as Jesus did in the world, to offer love and compassion and welcome and care to whomever appears before us. And to have the faith that even if what we're seeing doesn't seem to look right, we know enough about constancy and concrete operations. My dad would be so proud, y'all. That we can trust that God really is here in this. And it's because we are here and God is in us. And so faith, we need to remember, is actually a verb. We move through the world with faith. We act with mercy and justice and kindness and love because we have faith, because we trust that that is what's present and that's what is alive. And that, at the end of the day, is what will continue to live and what all of creation is groaning toward. So we may not be influencers with, 2 million followers, on social media. We may not be in the rooms where decisions are being made, and yet I imagine every single one of you, like me, has at least one story where one seemingly small act completely changed the course of your day or a week or a month or even your life. And so we have to trust that when we show up with love and care, we are the ones that are being that agent of change. And that the ripples of what we are offering are going to slowly become a tide and a steadiness of love and care that cannot be overwhelmed or beaten. So thank you for being here. Thank you for having the faith to get up this morning and come to church on a glorious spring day. Thank you for your willingness to sing beautiful songs about love and to read and say prayers about love, and then to leave this place and do your best to love. Because there will be times when it feels hard for me and I will look to you. And there will be times when it feels hard for you and we will look to one another. And so for that, I give great thanks and I say, Alleluia, Alleluia, Amen.